Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. No poder criativo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. É valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 22ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura, PRONAC 235060, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiências física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú, CCR e Suzano. Patrocínio Prata, MAC Móveis, Eletronuclear, O Globo e Sesc. Patrocínio Bronze, Sebrae e Globo Livros. Parceria institucional, Prefeitura de Paraty, Secretaria Estadual de Turismo do Rio de Janeiro e Museu do Território. É uma concepção Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Obrigada e boa mesa. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
A minha história foi sempre atrelada ao mar, né? A gente está todo dia ali trazendo alegria, felicidade para as pessoas durante o passeio, né? E as pessoas estão num momento de lazer, ali, de descontração, então eles também procuram não estar estressados, né? Se você for considerar que nós temos 90 praias e 65 ilhas, então boa parte do território, inclusive da população de Paraty, ela se encontra nesse local, né? O mar é uma grande via, assim, até porque tem muitos amigos que eu só encontro no mar. E Paraty, como todo mundo se conhece, né? Então, às vezes a gente está na correria do dia a dia, ou passando de moto ou de carro. Hoje em dia, dificilmente a gente anda a pé igual andava antigamente, né? O pessoal tinha mais tempo. Agora, todo mundo, a impressão é que a gente trouxe um pouco isso trouxeram um pouco isso da cidade grande, está todo mundo meio que com pressa. E aí no mar não, né? Então a gente está sempre encontrando os amigos, passa, bate a mão, né? Eu costumo dizer que meu trabalho assim é uma das coisas que eu faço que é mais prazeroso no meu dia a dia, né? Eu fico estressado quando eu não tenho trabalho, mas quando preciso sair para o mar, para mim é muito gratificante, é prazeroso, assim.
encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Boa noite. Estamos chegando na mesa 6 desse nosso primeiro dia de mesas completas. É uma mesa chamada Dormindo com o Inimigo. Para isso, a gente convidou o filósofo belga Coeckelbergh e o livreiro, que é essa profissão de que eu falei ontem e que é tão importante para todos nós. Então, foi muito bom ter o Caine, que é um livreiro norte-americano, que escreveu um livro interessantíssimo, de que a gente vai conversar. Mas a gente pensou essa mesa porque eu tenho uma sensação, acho que muitos de vocês têm também, da gente estar sendo cercado por uma coisa que a gente nem entende muito bem o que é. Então, quando a gente fala de privacidade hackeada, de compartilhamento de dados, de big techs, de inteligência artificial, a gente está falando cada vez mais dessas coisas em todas as instâncias, não só quando a gente usa a internet, mas até chegar no consumo e nas eleições. Então, para comandar essa mesa, eu vou chamar a Fabiana Moraes, que é uma professora da Universidade Federal de Pernambuco. Ela é colunista do Intercept, da Gama, e é uma grande jornalista que vai lançar um livro amanhã chamado Ter Medo de Quê? Textos sobre luta e lantejoula. Procurem saber que o livro é genial. Fabi?
Boa noite. Obrigada a Ana pela introdução. Agradeço a presença de vocês também. Não estou acostumada a falar com esse microfone. Estou me sentindo Madonna da Blood Ambition. Mas vamos lá. Essa mesa, como a Ana já antecipou, né, vai falar sobre a questão de inteligência artificial, política de uso de dados. E eu tenho pensado que, enfim, a vida da gente hoje, né, mediada fortemente por redes sociais, por big techs. Para falar sobre isso, eu vou chamar Coeckelbergh. Cadê ele? E chamar também Caine. Dani. Boa noite para Dani, para Mark. Vou fazer uma pequena apresentação sobre cada um. Mark é professor titular de Filosofia da Mídia e Tecnologia no Departamento de Filosofia da Universidade de Viena. De 2007 a 2019, ele foi presidente da Sociedade para a Filosofia e Tecnologia, a SPT. Em 2023, passou a ocupar a cadeira do Instituto de Filosofia da Academia Tcheca de Ciências em Praga. Em 2017, foi finalista do Prêmio Mundial de Tecnologia na categoria Ética. É pesquisador da Rede Mundial de Tecnologia e membro do grupo de especialistas de alto nível da Comissão Europeia sobre Inteligência Artificial. Ele publicou mais de 15 livros e diversos artigos no campo da filosofia e da tecnologia, com ênfase na relação entre ética, tecnologias como a robótica e a inteligência artificial. Seu livro, Ética na Inteligência Artificial, publicado pela UBU, foi traduzido no Brasil por Clarice de Souza, Edgar Lira, Matheus Ferreira e Valdir Delgado. Obrigada pela presença, Mark. Danny é escritor, é poeta e ele é dono da livraria independente Raven Bookstore, no Kansas, Estados Unidos. Ele é autor dos livros de poesia Continental Breakfast, Eldorado Freddy's e Flavor Town. Ele publicou o Necessário, Como Resistir à Amazon e Por quê? A luta por economias locais, proteção de dados, trabalhos justos, livrarias independentes e um futuro impulsionado por pessoas. no qual recorre a seus anos de experiência como dono de uma pequena livraria para expor importantes razões pelas quais não se deve comprar nada no conglomerado empresarial de Jeff Bezos. Os argumentos do autor, um defensor apaixonado de livrarias independentes, físicas, vão além de uma crítica ao modo como operam essas empresas, ressaltando os aspectos comunitários que se perdem a partir desse tipo de relação de consumo. Como Resistir à Amazon, publicado pela Elefante, foi traduzido no Brasil por Joana de Conte. Obrigada pela presença, Dani. Eu vou iniciar com uma questão que eu acho que perpassa fortemente a vida de todas as pessoas que habitam esse planeta atualmente, que é o cansaço. Eu acho que a gente nunca falou tanto sobre cansaço. A gente tem tem livros a respeito, né? A literatura hoje tem procurado também falar muito a respeito. E quando eu estou falando sobre cansaço, eu estou pensando numa vida sobrecarregada, no trabalho precarizado, na sobrecarga de informação, no uso das redes sociais e na falta de perspectiva frente à nossa falência ambiental, uma própria perspectiva de futuro. Então, é um choque de cansaços que resulta numa sociedade mundialmente esgotada. E eu gostaria de ouvir vocês dois a respeito. Dani, você acha que esse cenário de superesgotamento, ele beneficia as empresas de e-commerce, e nesse caso a Amazon, no sentido de torná-la um lugar muito prático, onde é possível comprar tudo, resolver tudo num clique e está resolvido, né? Numa sociedade muito cansada, esse tipo de oferta ela é muito sedutora. E para a Mark, o mesmo direcionamento, né? Esse esgotamento e a falta de perspectiva de futuro, eles podem facilitar uma produção menos ética da inteligência artificial, uma vez que é muito difícil acompanhar o que está sendo feito, né? É muito difícil entender o que está sendo feito, então é melhor simplesmente se entregar e deixar a coisa aí. Queria começar com Dani e depois Mark.
First of all, thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm falling in love with Parachi in Brazil, I'm absolutely thrilled. I think the question is really interesting, the question of whether everybody's fatigue and anxiety benefits Amazon and its convenience. And I think even beyond Amazon benefiting from the convenience, and when I say Amazon, I mean all big tech. In the US, we call them the big five: Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, and I'm forgetting the fifth. But it'll come to me in a couple minutes, and I'll let you know when it does. They don't just benefit from that fatigue. I think they're partly responsible for creating it. If you think about where does my anxiety come from? A chief source of my anxiety is endless scrolling on social media and seeing all the bad news that's happening in the world. And that feed, the Instagram or the Twitter feed, is designed to keep you locked in that experience, because there's no end to Twitter. You get to the bottom and it refreshes and gives you more tweets, and it's called infinite scrolling, and it's designed to keep you there. And so they're just feeding you this anxiety. Amazon, it's the everything store. They call it the everything store. So there's this impulse to buy everything. Like, I need all of this. For example, like on the front page, or when you buy something on Amazon, you look at the product page, it says, customers who bought this also purchased this. Forcing you, making you feel like you have to make the choice. Like, I'm missing out if I'm not buying this. And so I think there's a lot of things that big tech does to create that anxiety in you and to create a problem that didn't exist and offer itself as the solution. So one way I think that Amazon does that is, like, yes, it's very easy to buy something with one click and get it shipped to you very quickly. But they're not satisfied with just that. They want, in the US, which I heard that it hasn't come here yet, which is great. You should feel lucky. Amazon owns a company called Ring Doorbells. That's a video camera that goes on your front door, and it records everything. You don't have to push the button. It's always recording your front porch. And so if someone comes onto your front porch, you could even get a notification to your phone, like there's a stranger here. And they're creating it so you can, once you get that notification, you can send it to the police department. And all of a sudden, the police have this video of someone who might be up to nothing wrong. They want to listen to you inside your house. They have the Alexa device, the Echo, which is always listening to what you say, and they use that data to sell you things, to train its algorithm to tell you. They recently bought the company Roomba, which makes robotic vacuums. And again, there's data there. They want to see outside your house, they want to listen to you in your house, and they want to know the literal floor plan of your house, because they can get it from the Roomba. And so Amazon, by doing all this, their goal is to be the solution to everything for you. They call themselves the everything store, and it's not an accident. So by creating this anxiety, the big tech companies can then swoop in and offer themselves as a solution to the problem they themselves created. So I absolutely think there's a relation to the rise of the big tech monopolies and the kind of general anxiety in the world, in part because the anxiety in the world is coming from the big tech companies.
Mark.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. First of all, great to be here also. So the power of big tech and also this dynamic of creating the anxiety and then presenting the solution. And for me, what it reminds me of is generally that these new technologies, that they always promise to make things easier for us, but then in fact do the opposite. And I mean, a good example from earlier technologies is email. Email at first sight looks like it makes it easier to send a letter to someone, right? So it remediates this letter, but then it clogs our inbox and makes life faster, makes life harder because we have too much work with too much messages. And with artificial intelligence, that's also going to happen. So it's presented as something that makes things easier. It can take over tasks from us, but then it creates all kind of new problems. And some of these I discuss in my book, AI Ethics, which has also been translated here in Portuguese. So we have these huge challenges nowadays, ethical, political, created by these technologies, which in the end don't make things easier, but create their own kind of problems. And again, big tech then says, like, but we can solve it. And what is called is techno-solutionism, always the idea that if you have a problem, then technology will solve it. And that's not the case. So we have many problems in our society, including this fatigue, anxiety, and so on, that needs other solutions as well, not just technology. But these are complex social problems, and yeah, technology can make things rather worse than easier.
Tem ponto, essa pergunta eu quero direcionar a Mark, mas Dani, fique à vontade também para comentar, se quiser, né? Eu vou ler aqui porque tem alguns dados que eu preciso lembrar corretamente, né? O Conselho Federal de Farmácia brasileiro informa que entre 2017 e 2021, a venda de antidepressivos e estabilizadores de humor cresceu cerca de 58% no Brasil. Após a pandemia, o uso de sedativos e antidepressivos cresceu mais de 30%. Os medicamentos têm uma maior adesão entre pessoas empregadas entre 39 e 43 anos, seguidos na faixa entre 44 e 48 anos. Nos Estados Unidos, 13% dos adultos com mais de 18 anos, né, a partir de 18 anos, ou tomam algum medicamento antidepressivo ou... toma medicamentos antidepressivos, segundo o Centro de Controle e Prevenção em Doenças. Então, quero perguntar para a Mark, né? De que robôs e inteligência artificial a gente, de fato, vem falando? Né? Como pensar essa sobreposição entre a IA e uma sociedade altamente medicalizada né? E que para muitos estudiosos também, né, nós seríamos os próprios robôs a partir dessa mediação com a vida através de medicamentos. Queria que você comentasse isso e Dani se sentir à vontade também.
Yeah, I think that this illustrates also again this idea that technology is presented as a solution. The ancient Greeks had this word pharmakon. It's kind of technology. It can also be seen as a kind of drug, and so of course this is not going to be the solution, right? And in addition, what you have in society is a lot of people who have some vulnerabilities and problems. And if you add then technology to that, things can go horribly wrong. And with AI, for example, if you have chatbots that create some kind of personal relationship with you, that's okay if you don't have big psychological problems. But if you do, then it could be that the chatbot talks you into suicide even. So there are really serious risks related to having these chatbots creating a kind of personal relation. And again, big tech has an interest in stimulating that. It has an interest in making it seem as if we're talking to a person. They see this as a success, and they see this as a way to get our data and to also get more people to use the technology. But this can create this kind of problems.
I will add that Amazon has become a tech monopoly by gobbling up other companies. Like, this is what the big tech companies do, is they, instead of inventing something or having an idea themselves, they wait till a startup has gotten big enough and established enough, and then they just buy it and fire everybody who actually invented it and absorb it into their kind of growing empire. And Amazon has been making moves into pharmaceuticals and medical. It's really clear that they want to be in that space as well. And again, people say that on Amazon, you are not a consumer buying a product, you are the product. And the value in you to Amazon is your data. So I talked about how they're trying to see within your house. I'm sure if they could, they would want to see within your brain. So you could automatically just buy things. Like, if they could collapse that barrier, they probably would. And you think about Amazon in the health space, that's obviously, taking steps toward that, just minimizing, making it the most convenient possible for you to give them money. So I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay.
I was thinking about the chatbot, and there's a really interesting in the second edition of the book, which I don't think has been translated, unfortunately. So I'll just tell the story here. There's an artist named Angie Waller who creates. She kind of creates this kind of prankster art about Amazon, and she made a zine called "The Man Who Fell in Love with His Alexa," and it's just transcripts. She got her hands on some Alexa data, and it's just transcripts of what people said to their Alexa, arranged in a way that makes it seem like it's a love story between a man and his Alexa. And you building these relationships with your technology. There's a reason the Echo is just like a cute little speaker. They want to. If they could, they would merge with you completely and just have pure, unfettered access to your data. And so I think the question is of post-humanism and technology. I think Mark probably can speak way more to this than I can. But the question of at what point does our use of technology make us beyond human is really interesting and probably a productive discussion to have. But in the hands of big tech, who are just trying to exploit you and use your data to sell you more things, I don't trust them to mediate that discussion, because again, they're just trying to exploit you.
Yeah, and I want to add to that that this exploitation is really an exploitation of these kind of vulnerabilities and these insecurities that we have. And in another book, Self-Improvement, I argue that there is this whole industry that tries to sell us books, workshops, and courses, and so on, that that feed on the problems that we have. But these problems are also created by the same system. So you have this loop, which is creating profit for big tech, but which isn't really helping us because we have this kind of commercialized form of self-improvement rather than, what I would call real self-improvement based on wisdom that we can learn from traditions.
Eu não sei se isso já chegou nos Estados Unidos, na Europa, mas algumas pessoas estão fazendo terapia com o chat GPT, né? Não sei se vocês já ouviram falar disso. Tem gente fazendo terapia conversando com o chat GPT. Isso é uma questão. Essa pergunta eu quero dirigir para você, Dani. No seu livro você fala sobre a impossibilidade de competir com os preços baixos dos livros vendidos pela Amazon, uma vez que ela não precisa ganhar dinheiro com os exemplares vendidos. Livros não, você escreve, os livros não são o negócio da Amazon, são dados. E o preço é, de fato, a desculpa que eu mais ouço dos meus amigos toda vez que eu falo sobre como a empresa destrói pequenos comércios, para além de livrarias, né? A questão é que muitas dessas pessoas conhecem os efeitos negativos da Amazon, são amantes dos livros, muitas delas são do campo progressista e podem pagar um pouco mais caro pela compra desses livros. Eu estou falando, inclusive, de nós aqui, muitas vezes, né? Então, assim, vamos desinstalar a Amazon, pelo amor de Deus, hoje. O aplicativo. Eu queria saber como é que você percebe esse movimento, né? Mesmo entre pessoas que são amantes de livros, uma certa resistência e essa questão também do valor. E como é que você pensa se há uma reversibilidade de cenário, uma vez que mesmo essas pessoas amantes dos livros acabam também sendo clientes dessa Big Tech?
It's a great question, and I have quite a bit to say about it. The pricing thing is really interesting. So Amazon uses books as a loss leader, meaning they don't make any money on books. And here's how that works. Often Amazon will sell a recent bestseller at 50 to 60% off. I own a bookstore in the United States. I do the ordering. When I buy a book from a publisher, my wholesale discount is 46%. And that additional 44 is, so that's the 46%. That's the price of the book where I have to pay rent, I have to pay my employees, I have to I have to pay for everything. We have cats, so that pays for the cat food too. So if the discount of a book is 46% and Amazon is selling it for 60% off, they're losing 16% of that price. If I tried to do that in my book, I calculated it for the book. If I sold every book at 50% off, the bookstore would last a week, and then it would have to close, or something like that, roughly. But Amazon is fine. Amazon doesn't need to make money on books. They make money on Amazon Web Services. They make money on the exorbitant fees that people pay to sell on Amazon Marketplace, which can exceed 40% of a purchase price just for the right to sell on Amazon Marketplace and advertise your product so it gets high up enough in the search results that someone will actually buy it. So, I mean, obviously, this has the effect. Oh, and their goal in selling you that book, the reason why they're able to sell it and they want to sell it for less money is because now they have your data. They can get you to sign up for a Prime account and they can get their hooks into you and collect all that data for you to sell you more stuff. That's worth way more than the actual sale of the book itself. So the obvious effect of this is consolidating of the marketplace by closing their competitors. All independent bookstores and many larger bookstores can't compete with those prices, and so they're forcing us out of the market. I think the other arguably more important damage that causes is it devalues the book itself. If you sell enough books for 50% off, people are going to think the actual value of a book is 50% off. It's very expensive. You think about how many people work on a book. It's the Amazon book, it took me 2 years to write. Mark has spent years on books. That alone should tell you that, we need to be compensated for all the work we did to write a book, but so do the editors, the designers, the people who pack the books in the warehouses. It's really dangerous to devalue the price of books. But Amazon is so big and so dominant, and they sell their books for so cheap that, in general, in America, people think that books are just worth less. And the same goes for ebooks, which, Amazon is really determined to keep its, I can't do the currency conversion in my head, but $9.99. They've kept that price there for years. In spite of the objections of publishers and in spite of inflation or whatever else. So you have a book that's devalued, and that's what we have to fight against. And I think one way, that's in part, one of the reasons I wrote the book is as a resource for these conversations. In bookstores in America especially, every bookseller has to be prepared to have the Amazon discussion, meaning like, why should I buy this here? I can get it for 40% off on Amazon. If you're a bookseller, you have to have an answer for that. So in writing the book, I hoped to provide a resource that the booksellers could just hand, like, I can give you this answer, but this guy spent 2 years writing about it, so you can, read about it. And
Please.
A well-reasoned argument. But I do think those conversations are really powerful. I think one-on-one conversations in a space, in a relaxed and safe space, is a great way to change someone's mind. I could yell at people from my Instagram account all day long and be like, shame on you, stop buying from Amazon, cancel your Prime account, otherwise I hate you and you are dead to me. That's not going to convince anybody. You're not going to win an argument by making your opponent feel ashamed. And so what you do is you have this discussion. You have a calm and reasoned discussion. You talk about what's at stake. You talk about what Amazon is doing. And I found around the world that these conversations can really have an impact. And so if you have a friend who's otherwise, on the right side of things and is progressive and driven towards justice in the rest of their life, but they're shopping on Amazon, you could just have a conversation saying these things to them. And the other thing I want to say, and I say this every time I do an event for this book, is I think even talking to people about their Amazon habit personally is the wrong move, because it's not your fault that Amazon got this big. It's the fault of the US government. It's a systemic problem that tech companies can get this big. It's because the US has stopped enforcing certain laws a certain way. Companies can get as big as they want as long as they keep prices down. That's a problem, because once you get a tech monopoly, you get all sorts of scary, power dynamics, and the real power isn't in the hand of the government or the citizens, it's in the hand of the billionaires that own these companies. So it's really important not to, every time I do a book signing, people will come up to me like, I'm so sorry, I have to buy my dog food on Amazon. And you don't say like, well, shame on you, get a different dog or whatever. The answer to that is the fact that you can only buy that on Amazon is part of the problem. And here's what you can do to fix it. Thanks.
Preciso dizer, Dani, que eu cancelei minha assinatura no Prime, desinstalei por sua causa. Não está dando certo. Tirei, acabou. Eu tentando convencer meu companheiro agora.
I'm not going to complain if you do cancel your Amazon Prime account, but I'm just not going to yell at you if you haven't yet.
Eu cancelei. Jeff Bezos não precisa do meu dinheiro.
Thank you.
Uma pergunta para Mark e para Dani também. Tem a ver um pouco com o que Dani já falou logo no início da conversa da gente. Desculpa, só uma coisa que eu esqueci de falar, né? Vocês podem mandar perguntas também para Mark e para Dani. Quem também está ouvindo a gente na tenda também pode enviar. Eu faço as perguntas aqui. Dani, você falou um pouco sobre a questão dos produtos sugeridos pela Amazon após compras, né, que a gente faz e sugerem produtos. Isso é uma questão que você aborda no livro, né, Mark? Você trata dessa questão. Vou ler aqui. Eu quero perguntar sobre liberdade, autonomia e escolhas. Mark, você fala, usando como exemplo as sugestões de produtos que a Amazon sempre oferece após o fim de uma compra, sobre os efeitos negativos dessas dicas aparentemente inocentes. Tais escolhas, que pressupõem a liberdade de quem está comprando, elas podem ser consideradas o que você chama de um paternalismo libertário, você utiliza esse termo, que violam a liberdade mais integral. E eu gostaria que você comentasse um pouco sobre esse paternalismo libertário, essa ideia, e também sobre como esse paternalismo libertário tem a ver também não só com sugestões de produtos, comida de cachorro ou livros, mas também políticos, candidatos e candidatas a cargos eletivos, né? E, Dani, eu queria também te ouvir sobre isso e queria te ouvir um pouco sobre o que é que as livrarias físicas estão fazendo, né? Que estratégias elas vêm realizando também para conseguir não só manter, mas atrair novos clientes, né? No meio dessas, enfim, dessas estratégias das Big Techs. Então, Mark e depois Danny.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, just very briefly to pick up on the previous topic, I think a problem that's also really going to impact the book market and authors is that LLMs, large language models, can write text, right? And so there will be much more, not only fake videos, but also fake books. And so this is going to impact the market. And the question is like how, you know, when these technologies, when they are used to copy-paste from other work, basically, it's not copy-paste, it's a different technology, but in the end, the work of authors is used. How are they going to be compensated? So that's also an important topic. Then this libertarian paternalism, and it's a way to characterize nudging. And so what happens is that online, Amazon, for example, gives these recommendations. For example, when you buy Danny's book, it might say, you know, why don't you also have a look at Mark Coeckelbergh's books, right? And vice versa. This is, yeah, it's less innocent than it sounds, because what it does is that it undermines your autonomy. It gives you the impression that you have freedom and autonomy because you can choose, but this freedom to choose is influenced by influencing the kind of choices that you have. So you're basically being manipulated, like sort of under the radar of your consciousness. And this is, I think, a problem for consumers. It's also a problem in politics, that with AI we can now really target individual voters and manipulate their behavior, again, not by respecting their autonomy as, you know, free people who can make up their own mind, but rather influencing their choices, the environment in which they make those choices. So if we don't do anything about this, then we will have massive use of these tools of manipulation. And you know, that's across private and public sectors. Also governments can use it. So we have to really watch out for this kind of recommender systems and what they can do to us.
I totally agree, and I love the term libertarian paternalism. And it's like, it's a huge deal in the States right now. We're less than a month from a presidential election, and you know, a vast swath of the United States has decided that objective truth doesn't matter, and so you can tell them whatever. You've got a credulous audience, and then it's particularly, this is where Facebook enters the picture, because like a series of actions that Facebook has taken has basically killed the newspaper industry. So at least in the States. So where you once could gather objective facts and make up your own mind, now all you can gather is whatever Mark Zuckerberg and his algorithms decides will get the most clicks, which is clearly a decrease in the trustworthiness and the reliability of data. So how do we fight back against this via the independent bookstore model? First, I think it's what we put on the shelves. I say, in my second book, How to Defend Bookstores and Why, or How to Protect Bookstores and Why, I argue that like everything about a bookstore is political. Like what books you buy, who works there, what you put on the shelf, and what's on the shelf in relation to each other. Those are all political choices. And I don't say that in a negative way. I say that to say there's an immense power in a bookstore to have a point of view, to make the world a better place, you know, in some ways to do a small part in protecting democracy. And so that's the first step. It's just like a question of, like, Mark's book would get prime placement in our bookstore. Melania Trump's new memoir, probably not. And so then going along from there, in terms of books themselves, this algorithm of like people who bought this should, like, I wish the algorithm on my Amazon page said you should buy Mark's book. I don't think it's that good. I don't think it actually, like, the algorithm or artificial intelligence or whatever is running these algorithms cannot beat a human independent bookseller in recommending you a book. And I think that's a benefit for human booksellers. And again, it's kind of a one-by-one conversation-based thing. But every time you make a successful book recommendation, you're creating a relationship. That person's going to come back and say, okay, what else? Or okay, that bookstore has really cool stuff. And so that, in combination with what you curate and making sure to bring in a lot of small independent presses like Elefante, who published me here, shout out Elefante, it's combined, I think it can make a really big difference. These are all small things, but they're all things that combined can really powerfully make your community a better place. Does that answer your question? Okay, great, thanks.
Eu vou fazer uma pergunta agora, vou pular uma que eu ia fazer e fazer uma que chegou aqui, que tem a ver com o que você acabou de falar sobre imprensa, né, sobre jornalismo, né? Os jornais ao redor do mundo estão assinando acordos com empresas de inteligência artificial, né? Como fica a questão do direito autoral em relação a isso, né? Quando você tem grupos de mídia assinando com essas empresas. Mark, queria que você comentasse um pouco e Dani também, se...
Yeah, so I'm mainly interested in these copyright issues that come from the fact that LLMs produce text, right? So suddenly the question is like, okay, well, you know, to whom does this text belong? Who is the author of this text? And it seems like this is just a machine writing, but of course, if text is used from real human authors, there is a problem there, and I think we really need to think of creative ways how to compensate people, because what's now happening is that these big companies just scrape the data, including all the books that are there on the market. So yeah, we need to find a way to force them to do this in a different way, or to compensate others for this, because otherwise you have that problem. What's also difficult is that because it's not transparent which texts are used, so the system we now have, you cannot really trace back which texts are used and who were the original authors of the IDs. So these are really issues. But also if human authors use these technologies, the danger, I think, is that we get in a kind of loop where always the same kind of material is used, and that becomes more difficult for new ideas to take root. So we need to think about what kind of, how can we make sure that human creativity is supported there. That's very important. And then to come back to the political effects, I think there is, like in my book, a new book, Why AI Undermines Democracy, I also talk about the kind of knowledge environment that we're creating. Because if we have all this kind of misinformation, and if we have this loop of machine-generated texts that always refer to themselves, the question is how can we have a better knowledge environment and trust in society when all this when we can no longer trust the truth of these texts, and when we don't really know where they come from.
I think that I love that. It's really interesting, the idea that a large language model is incapable of producing an actually new idea because it's just trained on, you feed it all this stuff that already exists. I also think this ties into the argument that big tech is decreasing the quality of things like journalism and news. There's a great author named Cory Doctorow who does a lot of work in this space, in the anti-big tech space. He has a term for it. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, and I'll be interested to see how they translate it shitification, which, you know, basically means the more big tech touches things, the worse it gets. And so I don't know if you've actually run into a newspaper article written in AI. I fall for it all the time. And so it'll pop up on your Facebook feed, and it's like, this legendary local restaurant closes its doors. It doesn't say which. It has a picture that looks like it might be at your local restaurant. So you click on the link, and the actual news is buried like 20 paragraphs down, and it's a restaurant in, you know, very far from where you actually are. And the lead of the article is basically like, a restaurant is defined as a place where other people cook food and serve it to you via a wait staff. And so, like, I've been fooled into making this click, which Facebook is like, yes, that's money. And then I'm wasting my time on this, like, terrible news. So it's like, it's the same thing Amazon is doing to books. If you let AI write journalism, it's decreasing the quality of journalism. And God, if we ever need the journalists, it's now, right? With, like, everything that's going on and so many people trying to misuse their power and, like, you know, genocide. We need good journalists to cover this, and like the shitification of newspapers is like the worst possible thing to happen at this moment.
Só para a gente pensar também aqui em algumas questões propositivas, Mark. Assim, existe algum país hoje que tenha algum tipo de modelo? Estou pensando aqui em políticas governamentais em relação à IA, uma regulamentação que você acha interessante? Algum país ou alguma proposta que você conhece que você acha interessante em relação à regulamentação?
Yeah, so I don't want to say that that Europe is doing everything good, but there's some regulation in Europe now, the AI Act. Which puts some limits in place, and it's based on the idea that AI systems can have a certain level of risk, that some are more risky than others, and the more risky it is, the more you have to prove as a company that your AI is safe, that it you know accords to some ethical principles. So you have to assess it. And you have to show that it's not so bad. And I think that kind of regulation in general is not only needed there, of course. AI is a worldwide thing. It doesn't know borders. So what it means is that different countries need to think about this and are already thinking about it, but don't maybe have already this kind of comprehensive regulation. And also what it for me means is that I don't think every country should invent the wheel. I think we should collaborate internationally and preferably supranational, in the sense that we need some kind of global governance of AI, because it's a global problem. Just like we have other global problems like climate change, we really need to collaborate. Otherwise, it's not going to work if one country you know, does a lot, has, for example, a lot of environmental laws or has a lot of AI regulation, but some other countries don't have that, even if they're the biggest polluters, the biggest producers also of technology. I'm sorry to have to look to you, coming from the US, but yeah. So this kind of problems, I think we can deal with only if we have this international framework. Because, for example, US or China is not alone going to do this in a good way. I think we need to kind of make agreements that also globally we have some minimum ethical requirements for AI systems.
Uma pergunta para ambos. Uma tarefa no chat GPT gasta 10 vezes mais energia elétrica comparada com uma busca simples no Google. A inteligência artificial vai destruir o planeta além de derreter os cérebros? Danny?
Well, again, it's like I deferred to Mark on all things AI because he's such an amazing expert. But I do think the question of climate and big tech is not talked about enough. I think the issue of climate in general isn't talked about enough, but especially how big tech contributes to it. One of the reasons why I felt like I had to write a second edition of my Amazon book is because I felt I have to add a chapter about the climate. You know, in the U.S., at a certain time of day, you cannot drive down a single street without seeing an Amazon van. And these run on gasoline, and these are, you know, millions of vehicles that didn't used to be on the road, but now are, because everybody needs to have their stuff, you know, basically immediately. The warehouses with all of the emissions from these trucks, the warehouses are often in neighborhoods where people of color primarily live, less wealthy neighborhoods, and so they're bearing the brunt of the environmental effects of this. So, God, I hope AI doesn't destroy the planet. But you know, talking about government in the States, big tech used to really be the darling. Like, it was the positive example. This was American innovation, to the point that one of Barack Obama's press secretaries is now still the PR chief for Amazon. And this was, they give speeches at Amazon factories. I think this is getting a little better, very slowly. And certainly the current presidential administration has made some interesting moves towards bringing in these issues and trying to curb them and control them. But it's going to take a long time to get over the policies and the general mood that the government created through the 90s and the early aughts, saying like big tech is the shining example of American innovation. And so again, because the government is so hands-off about it, they can do whatever they want, including inventing this technology that has devastating environmental costs.
Yeah, so there are these huge costs, right? So it's not only the training of the models, but also generally these data centers that are needed for all our digital technologies. I mean, when we're talking about books, for example, a lot of books are now online readable, right? Which is sometimes a good thing because it also makes books accessible to maybe a wider audience. But at the same time, all this stuff is up in the cloud and has some kind of real environmental cost, material cost. This metaphor of cloud, it always sounds like computing is very clean and is something very immaterial, but in fact, as we know now, also through books like Kate Crawford's, for example, is that there is this infrastructure needed for it, and that there are these environmental consequences. So we need to do something about it. I mean, I don't think that AI should be blamed for everything, and that AI alone is like the big problem when it comes to environmental issues. I think there are many more polluters than AI companies. But I think it's part of the solution to hold these companies also accountable for that, and to regulate them in order to reduce the environmental impact.
Vou voltar aqui para minha colinha, depois eu volto para as perguntas da plateia. Mas é porque ela tem a ver com questões que vocês trouxeram, né? Destruição, poluição. E queria perguntar para vocês, se é uma coisa que me incomoda muito ao longo dos anos, isso explodiu muito durante a pandemia, né? Ficou famoso na internet o Eat the Rich, por conta da vida dos super ricos sendo mostrada naquele contexto de sofrimento, pandemia. E muita gente falava que a pandemia ia mudar o mundo e nós sairíamos daquilo tudo muito melhores. E eu acho que, infelizmente, isso não aconteceu, né? Pelo jeito, não deu muito certo. E aí, pergunto para vocês, né? Por que a compra de super iates, como o Jeff Bezos comprou, bunkers luxuosos também, como o Jeff Bezos comprou, com o nosso dinheiro, comprando livros na Amazon, esses bunkers e iates são comprados, inclusive, para se proteger do fim do mundo, né? Estão com altos estoques de gasolina, comida, motocicletas. Por que isso provoca, e pensando, inclusive, do ponto de vista ético, Mark, por que isso provoca mais fascínio do que terror, do que raiva? Quero perguntar isso para vocês, né? Vocês acreditam que uma maior concentração de renda, por exemplo, que a gente viu após a epidemia, isso, em algum momento, esse sofrimento, ele pode causar alguma resposta? A gente pode ter algum tipo de movimento social, seja em relação a vou parar de comprar na Amazon e vou apoiar o comércio local e a minha livraria, e vou tem uma relação, no mínimo, mais problematizadora em relação à própria inteligência artificial. Queria perguntar um pouco a vocês sobre esse cenário.
I mean, I personally would love to see Jeff Bezos' yacht sink. And I'm not alone in that, but there is a huge swath of the United States who, again, it's what does the picture of American success look like? And a lot of people think the picture of American success is Elon Musk. Like, that guy is richer than the sun. He can do whatever he wants. He invents cool things. Like, there are a lot of people that aspire to that, even though, like, statistically, it's basically never going to happen. There's no way. I mean, we're talking about, 5, 10 mega billionaires in a country with 300 million people, and just they have set up the system to be rigged against you. Like, you will not become a billionaire because that is the world they are creating. They want to stay billionaires and be the only ones, and that's how they built their system. And again, another example, I'm sorry, is Donald Trump. Like, this is the guy who, he's charismatic, he's mean, he's funny, he has so much money, and he can do whatever he wants. Like, I've felt so much pressure. This is a voice. I'm playing a character here. I have had to stay quiet with my racist beliefs for so many years. And I've had to keep it secret or talk about it quietly with my friends. But all of a sudden, here's this guy on TV just saying it out loud. I'm emboldened to. So they really keep this pressure. They want to appear cool because it makes people want to be them. So where are the other people? Why aren't they starting a revolution? I don't know. It's a great question. I wish they would. But I think back to the Occupy movement in the early 2010s, and this is exactly what they were complaining about. Their issue was wealth inequality, and their chant was, "We are the 99%," which means, what is it? The top 1% of people in the United States control the majority of wealth. I don't know the numbers, but it's like they're claiming that we are the working class. We are not rich, and we're gonna, pitch a fit and make noise about it. But it was really fascinating, and the main way it's called Occupy because they would take over public spaces like a park or a square, and they would camp out there as long as they could until the police cleared them away, and then they would be on TV getting arrested, and they would use that to, it's protest tactics. And it was really fascinating to see what the right did with this movement. They basically just nullified their arguments by saying nobody knows what these guys are talking about. I don't even know what they want. They're noisy, they smell bad, they're taking over our parks. And that was, in many people's minds, that was enough to nullify all of their concerns. And they do this again and again with protests in the United States. If you think about people who are protesting in solidarity and support of the Palestinian people, automatically you're anti-Israel. That's not what I said. In fact, I'm in solidarity with the Palestinians who are being murdered and slaughtered. I didn't say anything about my feelings, but they manipulate the argument in a way to nullify it. And because these people have so much power and influence, it works really well. Because a lot of these people, think Rupert Murdoch, one of the American billionaires, owns Fox News. He can control this most popular American news station to send out these messages. And so many people are watching it that it becomes their belief. So I think a lot of the reason why there isn't a bigger movement against the concentration of these wealth and these billionaires is because they're working really hard to quash any movements to maintain their grip on power.
Absolutely. I think that's also was really one of my concerns when I wrote the book, Why AI Undermines Democracy, that this kind of, it starts with this right populism, but it can easily end also in the end of democracy, in authoritarianism, totalitarianism, and we know this from history, but still people just vote for these people, and there seems very little that we can do to stop them. So that's really a danger, and I was very concerned about that, and it's really one of the reasons why I wrote that book. When you talked about this Elon Musk billionaires, when I wrote the book AI Ethics, one image I had in mind at the time was this car in space, Musk, this car in space. And for me, this was, for me, the key word is alienation. Alienation is happening also when we don't have the local bookstores anymore, but we have only Amazon. And alienation is also a kind of this desire to leave the earth. So these billionaires want us to go away from the earth, and they don't care about what we do on Earth and what other people might experience on Earth, right? So it's for me, it's a kind of philosophical thing that we, don't care about the Earth, that we want to go away from that, and that we also think of, people, that these billionaires think about people in two kinds of people. They're, on the one hand, they're the people that have a future, the people that believe in AI and that will be enhanced by AI, that will go to space, basically them first. And on the other hand, most of us that are supposed to, stay on Earth and live in a kind of zoo in the best case, or in a kind of like dystopian world. And we're really going towards that, I think. So we have to do something about that, high inequality. We have to do something about these anti-democratic tendencies. And we have to do something about this thinking of, denying our earthly condition and denying our human condition in a way.
In the very long passport control line at the Sao Paulo airport yesterday, I was standing directly behind a person who was wearing an Elon Musk branded T-shirt that said "Occupy Mars," which is terrible in multiple ways. Number one, you see how they take the message, the anti-billionaire message, and they just misappropriate it. So that's not what we meant by "Occupy," dude. And then second, if you're flying coach and standing on the customs line with the rest of us, you're not going to be on that spaceship to Mars. No matter how much you like Elon or like his tweets, retweet his tweets, it's not going to be you. You would already be a billionaire if you were going to make it there with him. So it just that memory popped in my head. It's very relevant to what we're talking about right now.
Absolutely.
Isso acontece no Brasil também, bastante. Não com camiseta de Elon Musk, mas com de políticos e empresários, que eu não vou nem falar aqui. Mas... tem uma pergunta voltada para você, Dani, um pouco longa, mas vou fazê-la, né? Hoje o mercado literário é refém das Big Techs. O TikTok é o maior vetor de vendas da literatura comercial. O Kindle é a maior plataforma de livros. O Goodreads da Amazon é a maior rede social de livros no mundo, assim como a Audible é a maior plataforma de audiolivros. Como as editoras que precisam chegar nesse público podem ajudar a proteger as pequenas livrarias? E como fugir, enquanto leitores, dessas plataformas?
It's a great question, and I think a lot of the danger in Amazon's ability to control the market is because of its size. This is why monopolies are bad, because these companies get so big that everyone else in the industry has to defer to them. So everything from, there's an ideal book length, there's an ideal book size, there's an ideal book cover that does the best on Amazon, and people are designing towards that. And no single company should have an entire industry in a chokehold. I'm not really a capitalist, but even capitalism is based on competition. And if there's only one company that you cannot compete with, that's a failure of an economic system. And it makes it really hard for anybody who is not working at Amazon or shopping at Amazon or doesn't want to. So it's a good question. How do we stop this? That's a lot of the reasons why I wrote the second book, and there's a pamphlet version called 50 Ways to Protect Bookstores. I think I saw a couple over at the bookstore tent. Not translated yet, but if you want the English version, it's over there. But largely, the bookstore is a community operation. The best bookstores are so thoroughly ingrained in their communities that you cannot imagine the community without them. And that's reciprocal. I mean, community is give and take. So if the bookstore is a critical part of your community, you should be a critical part of the bookstore's community. And that means, it doesn't necessarily mean buying books, but that's certainly the core of it, is doing what you can to economically support that bookstore so they can keep doing what they're doing. But there are a lot of other things you can do, like subscribe to their newsletter, go to events, like their tweets. If you go to a cool place like Brazil, bring their T-shirt and take a picture and tag them in it so they can repost that. There's just become kind of part of your bookstore, and in a small way that will help your bookstore, and they might spread that support to other bookstores, and we all support each other in the United States. Most of my friends are booksellers. And so like this community thing, though it starts really small with like your purchasing decision or where you go for fun that evening, can really easily spread. And like big tech wants you to feel isolated. They're creating these things. It's designed to keep you at home shopping on Amazon only. And to resist that, be part of your community. Shop at places that are smaller, independently owned. Buy the book from the cool small press instead of the best-selling celebrity memoir. And get involved in these ways so you're just indispensable to your bookstore's community because they really rely on that. And I know it's small, but this is a really huge problem. But I do think it has to be in large part a grassroots solution, and like a lot of people doing small things to work towards opposing this giant kind of oppressive system.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that we can also really have like sort of bottom-up initiatives, grassroots. So when I wrote about democracy, of course, we need top-down regulation, and the powers that are there, use them for good. But I think there's generally also with regard to democratization of AI, there's a lot that just every one of us can do, and that also like non-profit organizations can do to change things, right? So social change, I think, needs that both. It needs sort of like, on the one hand, leadership and some top-down actions via legal way, for example, but also that the concrete actions. And in the technology sphere, for example, there are many people that are part of hackers communities or of communities who want to develop technologies for good, and I would add for democracy. And so I think that's totally possible. And I think we should have policies that also really support more this kind of bottom-up initiatives, whether it's in a book market or in other markets. And with regard to other problems, rather than that we now have this kind of atmosphere where activism is suppressed, even in Western democracies. For example, in Europe, protested, say things about Palestine and so on, and they're suppressed even in Europe. So that I'm really worried about that, and I think that the only way to do something is also from bottom up to challenge that.
I know we're running out of time, but there's one great example of this, and it's what I'm writing my current book on. In the United States, we're in the middle of a book ban crisis where far-right activists are challenging library books to remove them from school libraries. And basically, to a T, these are by queer people, they're by people of color, or they're dealing, frankly, with subjects like sex and queerness. And they're just attacking. So they flood the libraries with requests to remove them, and many times when these books are under review, they're off the shelf. So it doesn't even have to be an official ban for it to work as a ban. And then they run for school board and library board. So they're sending in the requests, and then all of a sudden these people are also on the library boards that make these decisions, and they can really effectively take over the system, reshape it to their oppressive political beliefs. The way they can so easily take over these school board positions is because nobody votes in local elections, and nobody runs for school board, so they can basically run unopposed. And with just 1,000 votes, all of a sudden they're shaping the policies of a town or a library. And so obviously the solution is vote in your local elections, or even better, run for school board so there's a progressive, sensible voice on these things. So it really is about democracy in this way. Like it's technically about books and who can read them, but ultimately it's a democratic problem because you have people manipulating the system.
A gente está acabando, tem 7 minutos, mas a mesa rendeu. Olha a quantidade de perguntas que tem aqui para vocês. Não vai dar para fazer todas, mas... tem uma pergunta aqui para ambos sobre a questão de proteção de dados. Eu vou também fazer aqui vou interagir com ela, pegando o que vocês falaram agora há pouco, né? A pergunta é, sobre proteção de dados, como vocês consideram que isso afeta a vida dos jovens? Qual a influência ou impacto da proteção de dados para a criação de autonomia e formação de personalidade? E aí eu quero pegar esse gancho para pensar também Se vocês estão falando que as mudanças elas começam de baixo e também com a presença da gente na rua, ou uma presença não apenas, uma presença física, digamos assim, não apenas virtual, embora virtual também seja importante, obviamente. Será que essa questão da autonomia em relação aos jovens, né, essa formação de personalidade, hoje a gente não vem formando um pouco uma geração, inclusive, como é que eu posso dizer, mais resignada, ou existe uma resignação em relação a essa questão do estou em casa, consumo na rede social, compro na Amazon, que já me sugere o produto. Então, tem uma certa resignação, quase um desincentivo à autonomia.
I mean, that's certainly a danger that technology promotes this, but at the same time, I see a lot of young people protesting, I see a lot of young people taking initiatives and so on, and wanting to see change and not accepting the status quo. So I think we can also try to use the technologies that we have, like social media, for this purpose. We can also, I think, try to influence the development of technologies in such a way that we change it and develop technologies that do support democracy, technologies that do support social change. So I think there's also a lot of possibilities there, because often we tend to see technologies like AI as this thing that has this predetermined course towards a certain future. And that's what big tech wants to believe us, because they need that stories to attract investment. And they would like that we just, go with whatever they roll out over us. But we don't have to accept that. We don't have to accept those stories, and we don't have to accept those kind of lives. I think that what Danny is doing, I think, is like a good example of how you can do something partly also offline to show also that different ways of doing things are possible. And next to that, if we could force the tech development to become more democratic and ethical, if we force that they correspond to values that we think are important, rather than just supporting those billionaires, then that is also a good direction. I think we need to work on both sides. I think we need also, as more humanistic people, try to influence the tech development itself. And influence can also mean doing things yourself and supporting what's already there, what's already being done in tech communities that do not conform to the mainstream. So that's also like a good direction, I think.
I think I'll just add that I worry that a lot of social media native people, young people who have grown up in a world where there was no such thing as no social media, I worry that you say you have no privacy anymore, and they'll be like, I don't care. I don't care what TikTok does with my data. I see all this cool stuff. I see a teenage girl in tears over this romantasy book, and I want to buy it, and that's a satisfying interaction for me. And what TikTok does with my data is of no importance to me. So I think, again, it's important to have conversations about the risk of a world without privacy, and to make sure that we're getting that message to the social media generations. But again, I think this is a great place for a bookstore, because being a third place in a community, a place where people gather physically and have access to information that's not mediated by big tech, is crucially important, especially for the pandemic generation, where loneliness and depression were such an important issue. To bring people back into this space, this positive, pro-intellectual space where you have access to actual good information and art, is just crucial. It's vital, because again, what Amazon wants is just for you to stay home and give them all your data. So to fight back against that, come to a literary festival, be in the world, meet people, have authentic human interactions.
This is a great idea to have this kind of festivals.
Yeah.
Eu acho que com esse chamamento, um excelente chamamento, né? Uma excelente provocação também para a gente. Vou finalizando aqui a mesa. Quero agradecer muito a Mark, a Dani também, né? Eu acho que é uma conversa que, obviamente, não vai ter fim aqui. A gente tem várias questões aqui, para a gente puxar vários fios aqui. Eu acho que a questão aqui da democracia é fundamental nessa conversa. Quero agradecer a todo mundo que está aqui presente, agradecer também aos intérpretes e desejar uma boa noite para vocês e até amanhã.